Nakikita niyo ba uli yung PowerPoint ko? Ayan. Friends, hindi tatanggalin ko ang video ko ha kasi baka nagpapabagal yung ano ko, yung video ko. Okay? Tatanggalin ko lang yung video ko para ano, ayan. Sige. So, as I've said, so there are four nawala ba ako? Nandiyan pa ba kayo? Sige. So as I've said, there are four major pharmacokinetic processes, ADME for short: absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. Now, depending on the route of administration, depends whether absorption would be essential. As I have said, when a drug is administered directly to the vein, then no absorption is required. Why? What is absorption? So when we say absorption, it is the process where a drug goes to the central circulation. Okay? Baka tayo gumalaw. Yan. So absorption is that process where the drug goes from the site of administration to the systemic circulation. Now, if you give a drug directly to the vein, no, the drug goes to the circulation right away. So no absorption takes place. However, if a drug is given intramuscularly, okay, it's not directed to any vessel. So you will administer the drug through the muscle, and there the drug will have to be absorbed in order to reach the systemic circulation. In the same manner, drugs that are given orally will have to undergo absorption, and also with the topical with the topical preparation of drugs. So remember that the end point of absorption is when a drug is found in the systemic circulation. The next process is distribution. So what happens to the drug upon reaching the systemic circulation? It will be distributed to the different parts of the body. Okay? So the drug will be distributed first to the highly perfused organs like the brain, the heart, the lungs. Those highly perfused organs will be the ones to receive the drug first, followed by the lesser perfused and ultimately the areas where there is a least perfusion. So, doon muna talaga pupunta sa highly perfused organs. Now, then the drug is metabolized. Now, metabolism refers to the transformation of drug to its metabolites. Okay? Now, remember, when a drug is taken orally, it is first absorbed in the small intestine. And based in our knowledge in anatomy, okay, so the vessels will first travel to the liver before ultimately reaching the systemic circulation. So most of the drugs that we take orally will first go to the liver where it will be transformed. Okay? Some of it will be transformed to its metabolites, others will just escape to the systemic circulation. And lastly is excretion. Those drugs that were transformed to its water-soluble metabolites will ultimately be excreted out of the body. So when we say excretion, it's when the drug and its metabolites ultimately leave the body via the urine, most commonly via the urine. But they can also be excreted through the feces, through the perspiration, or through milk, no? Yung breast milk. Now, one of the things that we will have to study or understand in pharmacokinetic is how to prepare a dosage regimen. So what is a dosage regimen? A dosage regimen tells us how much drug to be given, how often, and how long. As to the question, how much? Okay, so how much do we give? What is the therapeutic dose? Okay, so the amount of drug that we will give to our patient should be just the therapeutic dose. Okay? As much as possible, we do away with the adverse effect. But there are drugs which even when we give them a therapeutic dose, will still have adverse effects. That's why we say that drugs are also poison. So, or the dose differentiate whether it's going to be therapeutic or it could be poisonous. So we have to be very careful. Next, as to how often. So we have to identify the effect of the drug. Okay? So the magnitude of effect eventually declines over time following a single dose regimen. So the question should be, how long should the drug be taken or how often in order to maintain a certain concentration that will give the therapeutic effect, and eventually how long does the patient needs that amount of drug in the body. Now, as we have started beginning of the at the beginning of our SEM, we have shown you a video on the different routes of administration. So it was shown you how drug is given intravenously, intramuscularly, or subcutaneously, and of course some oral route of drug administration. Now, why is it that we have different routes of drug administration? Because the route of administration will determine the rate at which the drug will be absorbed, or should we say, the rate at which the drug will ultimately reach the systemic circulation. Okay? Remember, for those drugs that undergo absorption, they have to pass through certain barriers. Okay? And so barriers from one compartment to the other and from extracellular to intracellular until it reach uh, its target. In pharmacodynamics, you were taught about the different targets of drug action. There are drugs that target the receptors. Most drugs target receptors, which are located on the cell membrane. So the challenge of distribution ultimately is to reach the target. Okay, not just the target organ, but the target of drug action. Okay, so remember that cells are made up of bilipid layer of cell membrane. Okay, so you have there the hydrophobic tails within, and then you have the hydrophilic uh, heads. So that's the cell membrane. So drugs have to permeate uh, the different barriers. So permeation of drugs can undergo any of these processes. They could simply go through diffusion, facilitated diffusion, or active transport. So one of the requirements for diffusion to happen is that the drug molecules have to be suspended in a liquid medium, and then it has to pass through a barrier, and the barrier is a semi-permeable membrane. So when we say diffusion, it is just a passive process because it does not require any energy, and the movement is from a higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. So that the limiting factor would be the one is the concentration. Once the concentration is almost equal on both sides, then the rate of diffusion declines. Okay? Not necessarily that it stops, but it merely uh, the rate of movement of molecules would decline. Right? It would be slower as compared when there is unequal concentration on either side of the membrane. So the rate of diffusion would be faster if the concentration or the if the concentration difference is high. Another factor is the thickness of the membrane. Of course, the thicker the membrane that separates the two compartments, the slower the rate of absorption. Right? That's the permeability of the membrane. And of course, the surface area. So that the net rate, when we say rate, it's the speed of penetration or movement is dependent, is directly related to the permeability of the membrane, the surface area, and the concentration. So, the concentration difference. So, now, what are the sources of variation? Again, we said that as to the permeability of the membrane, what dictates the permeability of the membrane? The molecular size of the metabolites or the drug. The higher the bigger the molecular size, depending on the size of the permeability of the membrane, will depend the rate of movement. Lipophilicity, the charge, the membrane thickness, and the surface area. Membrane thickness, surface area, these are all directly related to the rate of absorption or diffusion, rather, rate of diffusion. Now, if a drug is charged, it may impede the diffusion. How about lipophilicity? We said that the membrane is a hydrophilic, no? Hydrophilic. I mean, it's the membrane is composed of a lipid bilayer. So if a metabolite or a drug is lipophilic, then the movement would be faster. And the smaller the molecular size, the faster would be the rate of diffusion. Okay? Now, remember that our vessels, right? The permeability of the vessels depend on the site or location. So, for those blood capillaries located in the CNS, okay, testis and placenta, the capillary is made up of a single layer of endothelial cells which are tightly coaptated so that there is no space in between cells. Halos walang space because the cells are so close to one another. Such that the movement of drug from the blood to the uh, extravascular space would depend on its ability to cross the lining of the capillary. Since the endothelial cells are closely coaptated, the blood will have to move through the cells, and therefore it has to pass through the cell membrane. So in that case, a lipophilic drug would have a greater permeability as compared to a hydrophilic drug. In the same manner, if a drug has a big molecular size or it has a big or is highly charged, then its movement across the capillary would be slow. As of now, how about the capillaries in the renal glomeruli? The capillaries in the renal glomeruli are made up of endothelial cells, which are not close to one another, so that there is a space, okay, in between cells. So movement of drug from the intravascular space to the extravascular space could either be in between the cells or through the cells. Therefore, it allows for some charged molecules or larger sized molecules to permeate. Ah, so those are the things that we consider when we think of drug diffusion, okay, or diffusion or movement of drugs from the intravascular to the extravascular vascular compartment because that would be the part of distribution. Okay. Now, these are the characteristics of drug. Therefore, these are the characteristics of drugs that influence its transfer. The molecular size, the solubility at the site of its absorption, the ionization, and the relative lipid solubility. Okay? So, degree of ionization uh, refers to the characteristic of drug where it is able to attract water, resulting in a polar, relatively water-soluble and lipid-insoluble drug. So when we say that a molecule is ionized, it is more water-soluble. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, if we pertain to the movement of drug from the intravascular space to the extravascular space, and we want the drug to diffuse through, say, for example, in the brain, we need a drug that is not polar. Right? We need a drug that is not ionized, but we need a drug that is lipid soluble because we said that the capillaries in the blood-brain barrier is made up of highly or closely cooptated cells, so that the movement of drugs from the intravascular space would be through the cell. So they have to pass through the lipid bilayer. So in order for drugs to pass through the blood-brain barrier, they have to be they're supposed to be non-polar. They are supposed to be lipid soluble, right? What is pH partition hypothesis? Based on this hypothesis, only the unionized non-polar drug can penetrate the membrane, right? The cell membrane. So this is a limiting factor again for those areas in our body where the vessels, right, are lined up by cells which are closely cooptated. This may not be very applicable for drugs that for vessels that are not lined by those type of arrangement of endothelial cells. So aqueous diffusion occurs within larger aqueous compartments of the body and across epithelial membrane and endothelial lining of blood vessels. So when we say aqueous diffusion, the movement of the drug molecule is in between, okay, in between cells. So this would allow movement of larger molecules, ionized, hydrophilic molecules. Okay? So it can allow passage of drugs with a molecular weight of about 20,000 to 30,000. Okay? So this is, again, therefore the diffusion of drug is highly dependent on the concentration gradient. Okay? Concentration gradient. Another mechanism is via lipid diffusion, where the drug or the drugs pass through the cell. Okay, this is what you call lipid diffusion. So the movement of drugs is determined by the lipid aqueous partition coefficient of the drug. Okay, simply put, when you talk about lipid aqueous partition coefficient, this is a measure of the lipophilicity of the drug. So the more lipophilic a drug, the better would be its diffusion through this process. Okay. So the larger and more polar a molecule, the slower is its movement across membrane. When you say membrane, cell membrane, right? So So the small hydrophobic molecule can pass through and through the lipid bilayer. But for small uncharged polar molecule, okay, like water, glycerol, and ethanol, they could easily cross through the lipid bilayer. However, larger uncharged polar molecules and ions, okay, they could not easily diffuse. Okay? But it doesn't mean that they will not be able to cross. These larger polar molecules and ions can cross the membrane via another form of transport. Right? Now, this is the pH partition hypothesis. Okay, very weak acids like phenytoin, barbiturate, with a pKa of more than 7.5, they are essentially unionized. Again, when we say unionized, they are not slightly, they are more likely lipophilic. So that their transport is rapid. Oo. So, and the movement is independent of the pH. Now, the fraction of unionized particles changes dramatically only for acids with a pKa between 3 and 7.5. For stronger acids with a pKa of less than 2.5, the fraction unionized is so low that the movement would be very slow. Okay? So kapag ibig lang, so that means if a drug has a pKa of less than 2.5, okay, it is unionized. And therefore, its absorption would be very slow, or its diffusion through membrane would be very slow. Now, for weak acids, very weak acids, on the other hand, with a pKa of more than 7.5, they are also unionized at all pH values. So, that means a very weak acid and strong acid less than 2.5 or more than 7.5, they are unionized. Unionized, they are unionized. Okay? Uh, But the fraction of unionized will only change if the pKa is between 3 and 7.5. Okay. So remember that only the unionized nonpolar drugs can penetrate the membrane, and at equilibrium, the concentration of unionized species are equal on both sides. Okay? This is the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. Okay? But don't worry, we'll not be computing a lot of this, but it just shows you why those hypotheses come true. Okay? It's because of this formula. Okay? We must have remembered this when you were in chemistry long time ago. Okay? But I will not ask you to compute this anymore. Okay? Wag na. Iwanan na natin yan. Is via special carriers. As I've said a while ago, the larger molecules and those drugs which are ionized, or which are the highly ionized or polar, they could not pass through the membrane. So the only movement is via carrier. Okay, so the uh, the carrier-mediated transport is divided into two. We have the active and the passive transport. When we say active, it requires energy. So the movement of drug is facilitated by a transporter, could be an efflux transporter or an influx transporter. In active transport, the movement can go against a concentration gradient. So it does not follow a concentration gradient. It goes against. So it could be from lower concentration to higher concentration. Second, it is active, therefore it requires energy. Okay? So it reaches a transport maximum, or meaning to say this type of movement is saturable. So it depends on the availability of the energy and the transporter. Now the transporter is may be specific, and it could be inhibited by competitive inhibition. The passive facilitated diffusion, on the other hand, requires also a transporter. But this time it is passive, therefore it does not require energy. And the movement is only dependent on the concentration gradient. So therefore, this type of carrier-mediated transport cannot go against concentration gradient. So it's always from high concentration to lower concentration, requiring a transporter without energy. So the only limiting factor is the presence of the transporter. Okay? Again, the transporter may be specific for a specific type of substance or chemical rather. No? And it could be inhibited via competitive inhibition. And lastly, drugs can cross the membrane or the interstitium via endocytosis or exocytosis. So substances, this is especially true for those substances which are so large. Okay? Example would be vitamin B12, which requires it to be bound to a protein called the intrinsic factor, and then it would be endocytosed, and then ultimately when it goes to the interstitium, it would be exocytosed. Okay. Okay. So absorption is the process by which the unchanged drug proceeds from the site of administration to the plasma, okay, to the systemic circulation. So the drugs that are given orally. So these are the factors affecting the rate of absorption of drugs given orally. Okay. So what are the factors that affect the absorption? The surface area of the absorbing surface. So when we take drugs orally, it will pass through the mouth, through the esophagus, to the stomach, to the small intestine, and to the large intestine. So the small intestine has the largest surface area. Okay? And therefore, it is where most of the drugs would be absorbed. And the permeability of the small intestine is greater compared to that in the stomach, such that majority of the drug would be absorbed in the small intestine. Of course, there would be also some drugs that can be absorbed in the stomach, but not as much as in the small intestine. Second, that the blood flow to the absorbing area. The small intestine has greater um, as blood flow. Okay? It is more highly perfused compared to the stomach. Therefore, the absorption would be higher in the small intestine. Okay? So that is the reason why most drugs or even food would be absorbed in the small intestine compared to the stomach and the large intestine. Kaya sabi natin, absorption takes place in the small intestine. Another factor that could affect the absorption would be the degree of ionization, the dissolution rate of the drug, and gastric emptying. Right? As you said, drugs are absorbed in the small intestine. So, when the gastric emptying time is low, mabagal, okay? That means lesser drugs goes to the small intestine, therefore lesser drugs would be absorbed. What if there is increased gastric emptying? Right? There is fast movement of drug from the stomach to the small intestine, then absorption could be enhanced. The dissolution rate of the drug. So when we say dissolution, this is true for drugs that requires uh, that requires it to be dissolved. Like, for example, the tablet and the capsule. That is why we have tablets that are, we call that slow release, SR. So when you say slow release drugs, these are drugs with a very low dissolution rate. So the purpose is to uh, slow down the absorption of the drug so that the effect of the drug could be longer. Uh, Now, the degree of ionization. So we say when the drug is highly ionized, it cannot easily penetrate membrane and therefore absorption may be delayed. Now, what is bioavailability? The bioavailability is the fraction of the administered dose of the administered dose systemically absorbed intact. So Mathematically, it can be represented by this following equation. Bioavailability is the quantity of drug reaching the systemic circulation over the quantity of drug that is administered. For drugs which are given directly to the vessels, the availability will be 100% because the amount of drug that you administer goes directly to the systemic circulation. But for drugs which are taken orally, okay, remember when a drug is taken orally, the drug may be absorbed. Okay, let's say it's fully absorbed in the small intestine, but before it goes to the systemic circulation, it has to pass through another organ. Remember that anything that goes to the mouth, that goes through the mouth to the stomach, to the small intestine, the first the blood flow is from the small intestine goes to the portal circulation first, okay, before it reaches the systemic circulation. So that drugs taken orally will have to cross the liver before they go to the systemic circulation. And we say that the liver is a metabolizing organ. So some drugs may be trapped in the liver. Some drugs may be destroyed or metabolized in the liver, okay, such that not the entire amount that has been absorbed will reach the systemic circulation. So that is why, okay, there is a difference in the amount that reaches the systemic circulation versus the amount that is administered. So the quantity of drug reaching the systemic circulation from the amount of drug that is administered, okay, is what you call bioavailability. Okay? Example. Example is aminophylline. Aminophylline is a drug used for asthma. So, say for example, the preparation is 80 to 85% theophylline. Okay? Given that F means the bioavailability. It is a sign for bioavailability. When you say F is 100%, the bioavailability is 100%. Now, there are drugs which, even when taken orally, okay, they do not have big, they do not, they can pass the liver, but the liver does not trap the drug. Okay, that's why it has 100% bioavailability. Okay, we will remember, we will uh, see that later. No? Say, for example, that aminophylline is 100% bioavailability. A patient who took 2 tablets of 200 milligram theophylline will have absorbed milligram of the drug. How many milligrams? So you do not know the amount of drug that is absorbed. So the amount of drug absorbed is equal to the S. It is the preparation of the drug. Okay, this one 0.85. So in this case, could be zero point 0.8 multiplied by the bioavailability. So it is expressed in 100%. So times 1 multiplied by the amount that is given. 2 tablets of 200 milligrams, so 400 milligrams. So therefore, the amount of drug that is absorbed is 324 milligrams. Okay? So a patient who took 2 tablets of 200 milligram theophylline will, the amount that will be absorbed would be 324 milligram. Okay, so that's the use of your bioavailability. Now the bioavailability, sometimes the S or the percentage of the drug is not given. So if that is the case, it is understood as 1. Okay, yeah. Now, what are the causes of low oral bioavailability? So, when we say low oral bioavailability, lesser amount goes to the systemic circulation. One is poor intestinal permeability, means say the drug is not easily absorbed in the small intestine. Then there could be competing reactions with the GI3 in the GI within the gastrointestinal tract. Example, the carboxylation of levodopa may lead to loss of its activity. Meaning to say, when you give levodopa orally, right, while the drug is still in the gastrointestinal tract, while it's still in the stomach, the small intestine, the carboxylation has already started, such that less amount of the drug goes into the systemic circulation. And that is what you call the first pass loss. No? First pass. and then insufficient time for absorption. Say, for example, if a patient is having diarrhea, so there is less contact time of the drug in the small intestine because it goes right away to the large intestine to be uh, excreted. So insufficient time. There is insufficient time for absorption. So these are example of drugs with low oral bioavailability due to poor intestinal permeability. Meaning to say, these drugs cannot be absorbed in the small intestine because of the characteristic structure. Okay, they have a very big structure that could not penetrate the wall of the vessels in the small intestine. So these are your amikacin, carbinecillin. So most of them are antibiotic: amikacin, gentamicin, neomycin, vancomycin, streptomycin. Nakita niyo naman pare-pareho ang ending. They have the same suffixes. So these are all antibiotics. Same thing with carbenicillin, cefamandel, cefazoline. Yan. Cefta. These are all antibiotics also. Okay? So these are antibiotics that cannot be taken orally. Therefore, they are given by a different route of administration. These are some representative reactions in the gastrointestinal tract that may compete with its absorption. Say, for example, tetracycline, an antibiotic. No? Its absorption may be impeded when it is taken together with milk, okay, with iron, with drugs, with iron supplements, or drugs containing aluminum. Okay, so because tetracycline will simply complex with these ions, which will prevent its absorption in the gastrointestinal tract, leading to lower bioavailability. Isoproterenol and salicylamide. Isoproterenol can undergo conjugation right away in the gastrointestinal tract, losing its activity. Right? So it may undergo glucuronidation, salicylamide. So it will become inactivated and therefore easily excreted. We've already mentioned about levodopa. These are all other example of drugs that may have incomplete, decreased or incomplete GI absorption. Now, what is first pass effect? I keep on saying first pass effect. Now, first pass effect is the loss of drug during its first passage across the gastrointestinal tract and the liver. As I have said, any drug that you take orally and then absorb in the small intestine will go directly to the liver. So, the blood flow would be from the small intestine to the liver. Then there in the liver, the drug can be metabolized. Some of the drug may be trapped and metabolized in the liver, leaving only a few amount to the systemic circulation that will be distributed to the other organs in the body. So, what is the effect of first pass elimination on bioavailability? So, um, what is ER? ER is the extraction ratio. When you say extraction ratio, this is the amount of drug, okay, that is cleared in the liver over the amount of blood that goes to the liver. Q is the hepatic blood flow, which is normally 90 liters per hour in a 70 kilogram individual, such that the systemic bioavailability of the drug can be predicted from the extent of absorption and the extraction ratio. So, when the extraction ratio is high, then the bioavailability is diminished. In the same way, if the extent of absorption can be extracted from this formula. Okay? So, the systemic bioavailability of the drug, F, is equal to the extent of absorption multiplied by 1 minus the uh, extraction ratio. Okay? So, 1 minus the extraction ratio. So, it's always 1 minus point something. Then you multiply it with with the extent of absorption. So if you do not know the extent of absorption, then, and you know the bioavailability, then all you have to do is extrapolate from this formula. So that would be a bioavailability over the 1 minus ER is equivalent to the extent of absorption. Okay? Ayan. So, these are the hepatic extraction ratio of representative drug. So, those drugs with low hepatic extraction includes carbamazepine, diazepam, ibuprofen. Okay, these are drugs with intermediate hepatic extraction, and these are drugs with the high hepatic extraction. Okay, so when we say high hepatic extraction, these are drugs with high first pass effect. Kasi when you say extraction ratio, this is the amount of drug that is extracted from the blood every time the blood goes to the liver. Okay, so say for example, if you have zero point 0.7. So this means 70% of the blood flow to the liver. By 70% of the drug is extracted from the blood, okay, that goes to the liver per hour. Yan. So therefore, drugs with high hepatic extraction ratio are drugs with poor bioavailability. Kasi na-extract na siya. Whereas drugs with low hepatic extraction would have higher availability because only 30% of the drug, okay, from the blood, from the hepatic blood flow would be extracted. Uh, and the rest would go to the systemic circulation. Now, um, Now, once the drug goes to the systemic circulation, okay, there is what you call time to peak concentration. So when you say peak concentration, this is the maximum concentration of drug that reaches the systemic circulation. Okay? So the time to peak concentration will depend on the route of administration. So obviously, drugs that are given intravenously would reach the peak concentration the fastest as compared to oral and rectal. Because drugs given orally will have to undergo absorption, the small intestine, and then it will go to the liver where some of the drug will be extracted, and therefore the peak concentration, the time to peak concentration would be slower. Plus, the peak concentration would not reach as much as the concentration of a drug given intravenously. Why? Because, as we've said, drugs taken orally and rectally would have issues regarding absorption and first pass metabolism. Why is rectal route, why do drugs given via rectal route undergo first pass metabolism? Remember, there is also the passage of, there is also the blood flow, okay? Some, the upper, the hemorrhoidal artery, or yeah, the artery goes first to the portal circulation before even going to the central circulation. So that's where the first pass effect can happen. Plus, the absorption at the rectal route, via rectal route, could also be erratic, depending on how deep the drug is administered. Now, what is bioequivalence? Now, bioequivalence is the extent and rate of absorption of a drug. Uh, Now, the extent and rate of absorption of a drug is not significantly different from those of the standard drug when administered at the same molar dose. So, this is just a measure of well, although we could not say bioequivalence is the same as uh, same efficacy, it merely tells us that when you compare two drugs, the amount of drug that goes into the systemic circulation would be the same for two drugs. Example. You have two brand names, same paracetamol, okay? Different brand names. So the issue of bioequivalence is a more expensive drug has higher bioequivalence compared to the cheaper drugs? Kasi that's one of the issues, no? Surrounding the generic drugs versus the branded drugs, no? The branded drugs are the expensive drug. They say they have higher bioavailability. Now, the cheaper drugs can also have the same bioequivalence as a branded drug, provided that the amount of drug that reaches the systemic circulation would be the same as the uh, branded one. So yung standard drugs usually, uh, the drug that was initially done for, that is initially marketed for that particular generic drug. Okay? So yun. Now, what is distribution? So, distribution now is the movement of drug from the vascular system to the different organs of the body. Okay. So, so the premise is that in distribution is that the blood is already in the systemic circulation. So, whether it is taken orally, it was given intravenously, the premise in distribution is that the drug is already in the systemic circulation, central circulation. So from the central circulation, the drug will now be distributed to the different organs of the body. So distribution is determined by the relative strength of the drug binding to tissue compartment versus the plasma protein. So remember that when a drug is still inside the vessel, most drugs would be bound to a protein. Right? Now there are two phases of distribution. The first phase would be the distribution of drug to the well-perfused organs like the heart, the liver, the kidneys, and the brain. These are the organs of the body that will receive the drugs first, followed by the second phase. The second phase is the delivery of drug to the muscle, viscera, skin, and fat, which has slower and limited blood flow. So what are the factors that affect the rate of distribution? Okay, of course, the perfusion, okay, delivery of drug to the tissue, which has something to do with the perfusion of that organ. So if there is obstruction to the flow of drug to that particular organ, then there would be less distribution of drug. You know? Then ability to cross tissue membrane. Again, this has something to do with the permeability of drug surrounding that particular compartment. Say, for example, in the CNS, say that the CNS is protected by the blood-brain barrier, where the capillaries are made up of endothelial cells, which are closely cooptated to one another, such that the movement of drug from the intravascular space would be through the cell, what you call lipid diffusion. So that's a limiting factor for its distribution to this compartment, as compared to different compartment where there where the movement of drug from the intravascular space can pass through the cell or in between cells. Right? Another factor that affect distribution is binding with tissues and blood. Okay, so within the intravascular space, as I've said, drugs may be bound to carrier protein. Okay, so the more tightly bound a drug is to that carrier protein, the lesser would be its distribution. Okay, now if it is not highly protein bound, then the drug could easily escape the circulation. It could easily move out of the intravascular space. And if it has higher binding capacity with the tissue, then the more blood will escape. Ah. And then lastly, partitioning to fat. So those drugs that leave the systemic circulation and then bind with fatty tissue, these drugs go to the adipose tissue. They tend to stay there for a long period of time because one, the perfusion there is very low. So once the drug is distributed, it may not be taken up right away. And so the drugs may accumulate there. No, there is not much blood flow to take back the drug and then bring it to the liver for metabolism. Now, so the rate of drug distribution to the tissues could either be perfusion rate limited or permeability rate limited. What is perfusion rate limited? When we say perfusion rate limited, the movement of drug from the intravascular space to the tissue is limited only by the blood flow. Okay? Meaning to say, the tissue membrane present no barrier with distribution. So, ibig sabihin, the drug can easily goes to the tissue as if there is no barrier. The only limiting factor there would be the rate of perfusion, the rate of blood flow. So the more blood flow that goes to that particular tissue or membrane, the more drug will be distributed there. Okay? However, if the perfusion is limited, say for example, there is obstruction, then there would be less drug that will be distributed to that particular tissue. How about permeability rate limited? In permeability rate limited, the drug distribution is limited by the membrane permeability. Okay? Membrane permeability. Meaning to say, there's nothing wrong with the blood flow. The blood flow is okay. But even though even though the organ is highly perfused, the problem is the membrane is not very welcoming. It does not allow the drug to diffuse rapidly, and so the distribution is limited. No? So permeability rate limited is a good example here is the blood-brain barrier. Okay? Even though it is highly perfused, but the membrane, as said, present as a limiting factor for the distribution of drug. Perfusion rate limited example would be in the glomeruli. The drug could easily move out from the glomerular capillaries, but the problem is when there is decreased perfusion. That's the only limiting factor there. So therefore, the drug would not be distributed. How about ionization? So I've already said this before. So weak acids, they are mostly unionized, and the transport is very rapid. For unionized portion, only changes for acids with pKa values between 3 and 7.5. Strong acids with a pKa of less than 2.5, they are unionized is low. Mababa ang unionized. So strong acids, they are highly ionized, and therefore the transport is slow. Okay? But for unionized, the transport is very rapid. So if the pKa of a drug is more than 7.5, it is mostly unionized, therefore it is easily distributed. But if it is a strong acid, less than 2 pKa of less than 2.5, the transport is very slow, so it is not distributed. But for those drugs with a pKa between 3 and 7.5, the portion that is unionized will depend on the acidity of the medium where the drug is presented. Okay? How about weak bases? If a drug is a weak base with a pKa of less than 5, most of it will be at the unionized moiety. And again, if it is unionized, it is lipid soluble, and therefore it can easily be distributed and absorbed. Strong bases, on the other hand, with a pKa between 5 and 11 will vary. The transport will vary depending again on the pH of the compartment where it is presented. So the effect of pH on the rate of penetration is expected only if the limitation is in permeability. So itong mga ionization na ito, itong mga to, pinagsasabi na to, okay, this will only matter if the compartment is limited by if the limitation is impermeability. But if it is only perfusion rate limited, okay, the ionization will not matter. Okay? So remember this. Now, protein binding. I said that most drugs in the intravascular space is bound to protein. Acidic drugs like barbiturates bind to albumin, while basic drugs like opioids bind to alpha 1 acid glycoprotein. Now, the binding of drug is reversible. Okay? Within the intravascular space, the binding is reversible. And the binding sites are also non-selective. So some drugs can bind to the same albumin, right? Because albumin is a big molecule, right? And therefore, one can displace another. Remember that those drugs that are bound, they are inactive. Only when they are free will they become active. So you just imagine a drug bound to albumin. Right? Albumin is a big molecule. Then the drug attaches to it. So once while it is still bound to albumin, it is not easily distributed. It stays in the intravascular area. But once the drug molecule is freed from the albumin, then it could easily escape, okay, the endothelial lining of the vessel. Now, only drugs which are highly bound with a small volume of distribution, VD is volume of distribution, are affected by changes in protein binding. So, in general, all drugs are bound to protein. But drugs which are bound, more than 90%, if more than 90% of the drug within the intravascular space is bound to protein, we say that they are drugs with a small volume of distribution. Okay? Remember that only the unbound drug can cross the membrane. Okay? And therefore, um, they are active. Protein binding and ionization can only affect the rate of diffusion if the rate limiting step again is permeability and not perfusion. Okay? So, okay, only free drugs are active. Ah, kasi the free drugs are the ones that could be distributed. Kaya sila yung active. Okay? So these are just some of the physical volumes of some body compartment to which drugs may be distributed. Okay? So the total body water is zero point 0.6 liters per kilo. So examples of drug that could easily be distributed to the total body water is ethanol. The extracellular water, okay, is zero point 0.2 liters per kilogram. Okay? And here is where the larger water-soluble molecules may go. The distribution would be a sample of gentamicin can go here. The plasma, okay, is zero point zero 0.04 liters per kilogram. So large protein molecules like the antibodies stay in the plasma and their volume of distribution would be zero point zero 0.04 liters per kilogram. So when you say that a drug has a volume of distribution similar to water, then you can compute it zero point 0.6 liters per kilo. So almost the same. Right? So ethanol would have the same volume of distribution. Right? For highly lipid-soluble molecules, okay, like diazepam, they are highly distributed to fatty tissues, where which is about zero point 0.2 to 0.35 liters per kilogram. And then the bone uh, is zero point zero 0.07 liters per kilogram. So certain ions like lead and fluoride are distributed in the bone. Therefore, their volume of distribution would be somewhere in this value, zero point zero 0.07 liters per kilogram. So, what is apparent volume of distribution? Okay, so the apparent volume of distribution, letter V, represented by a letter V. Letter F is for bioavailability. Letter V is for volume of distribution. So apparent volume of distribution is the amount of drug in the body over the plasma drug concentration. Okay? This is the total amount of drug in the body at equilibrium over the plasma drug concentration. So the larger the volume of distribution, the smaller the fraction in the plasma. Di ba? Tama? So, simply put, the apparent volume distribution is the dose that you have given over the plasma, is the dose, the amount of drug in the body over the plasma concentration. Okay? So, lower volume of distribution usually approximates the plasma volume. Okay? Which means that the drug is restricted to a particular compartment. But if the volume of distribution equals the total body of water, then the drug is concentrated within the intracellular compartment. Okay? So, right. The volume of distribution is very useful in predicting the plasma drug concentration. So the plasma drug concentration is computed based on the dose that was administered multiplied by the bioavailability over the volume of distribution. Most of the time, the volume distribution is already given. But what is the use of knowing the volume of distribution? Knowing the volume of distribution will now allow us to predict the amount of drug in the plasma or the concentration of that particular drug in the plasma. Right? So that is the usefulness of knowing the volume of distribution. We can predict the plasma drug concentration, or if we know the volume of distribution and we already have a plasma drug concentration in mind. So our question is, how much do we give in order to achieve that certain concentration, right? So this is how you can compute that. But we will review that later on. No? So this is a sample problem. You have a 50-kilogram patient who took 2 tablets of 500 milligram paracetamol. What is the estimated plasma drug concentration if the bioavailability of the drug is 80% and the volume of distribution is zero point 0.9 liters per kilo? Okay? So the plasma drug concentration, again, is the dose multiplied by the bioavailability over the volume of distribution. So what was the dose? 2 tablets, 500 milligrams. So that's 1,000 milligrams. Multiplied by the bioavailability because it is taken orally. So zero point 0.8 multiplied by zero point 0.8 over the volume of distribution, which is zero point 0.9 liters per kilo. So zero point 0.9 multiplied by 50 kilogram. So the plasma drug concentration is 17.77 milligrams per liter. Why do you want to need the plasma drug concentration? Because if we know the plasma drug concentration, we will know whether we have achieved the effective therapeutic concentration, or we have reached the toxic level. Okay, so that's the usefulness of knowing the volume of distribution and the bioavailability. Next, we go to elimination. Elimination is actually made up of two processes, excretion and metabolism. Remember, elimination is not the same as excretion. Elimination is excretion and metabolism. Right? So, metabolism is the sum of all chemical reactions for biotransformation of endogenous and exogenous substances. So, it is a process by which both endogenous and exogenous substances enter the body, that enters the body are changed. Okay? Di ba sabi natin from hydrophobic to hydrophilic molecule to facilitate ultimately its excretion. So the primary metabolizing organ in the body is the liver. Okay? It has the highest capacity for biotransformation. So there are two phases of biotransformation, phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, uh, Biotransformation processes include oxidation, hydrolysis, reduction, leading to metabolites which are either water soluble or still lipid soluble. Right? If the product becomes or the metabolite is water soluble, then it is excreted directly to the urine or the bile. But if it's still lipid in its if it's still lipid soluble, then it may undergo phase 2 biotransformation. Phase 2 biotransformation includes conjugation or glucuronidation. Right? So leading to metabolites which will ultimately become water soluble or polar, easily excreted in the urine and the bile. Okay? So again, phase 1 metabolism results in the loss of pharmacological activity of a drug, although there are examples of retention or enhancement of activity. Because remember, when we say the drug is undergo biotransformation, the drug may become inactive or it may become active, depending on the preparation of the drug, because there is such thing as prodrug. Prodrugs are drugs which are inactive once they are administered. But once they reach the liver, they undergo biotransformation and release active metabolites, which now results in the therapeutic activity or therapeutic effect of the drug. Phase 2 leads to formation of covalent linkages between functional group on the parent compound with glucuronic acid, sulfate, glutathione, amino acids, or acetate. Right? So it could be if the uh, drug binds with glucuronic acid, say they undergo glucuronidation. If the functional group link with sulfate, then you say it's sulfation. Right? Yan. Now, what are the factors that modify metabolism? So the age of the patient. So the older you are, the the metabolism could be slower. Kaya nga when you reach the age of around 40, late 40s to 50s, females start gaining weight because the metabolism may be slow. The same manner, very young patients will not have the same metabolic capacity as that of an adult. Say, for example, the newborns, they do not they, they do not have the same metabolic capacity as an adult, and therefore the there are drugs which you cannot give to that particular age group. Right? Another factor that modify metabolism is genetic polymorphism. Right? So this, when you say genetic polymorphism, it refers to uh, the effect of genes, okay, on the form of metabolizing enzymes. Okay? So we will discuss this more when we go to pharmacogenomics. Another factor that affect metabolism is the concomitant use of other drugs, which is what you call the drug-drug interaction. There are drugs that may inhibit or enhance metabolism of another drug. Either way, it will affect the therapeutic effect of the other drug. Exposure to environmental pollutants and industrial chemicals. Same thing with drug-drug interaction. Pollutant or chemical and drug interaction may affect their metabolism. Could enhance or inhibit. Right? And that could affect the efficacy of a drug. Disease states. Right? So um, diseases like, say, for example, the patient developed liver failure, then the metabolism of drug would be greatly affected. In the same manner, when a patient has a disease, not necessarily a liver failure, but there could be obstruction of blood flow going to the liver, then the metabolism of the drug may also be affected. Now, enzyme induction in inhibition, this has something to do with drug-drug interaction, food-drug interaction, or pollutants and chemical drug interaction. Now, cytochrome P450 is a group of drugs, okay, that generally is responsible for phase 1 metabolism. Okay? Phase 1. Uh, usually oxidation yan siya. So, nung araw, during our time, we simply refer to it as cytochrome P450, metabolized by cytochrome P450 enzyme in the liver. That's it. But now, okay, the different cytochrome P450 enzyme has gone to their different identification. So we have what you call the CYP1A2, CYP2C9, CYP2C19, CYP2D6. These refer to the particular cytochrome P450 enzyme that metabolize particular substances. Say for example, the CYP1A2 metabolize caffeine, ciprofloxacin, theophylline, and warfarin. CYP2C9 metabolizes diazepam and omeprazole. And here is where drug-drug interaction may take place. One drug metabolized by CYP2C9 may inhibit, okay, the activity of that particular enzyme. And therefore, it will affect the metabolism of other drugs metabolized by that particular enzyme. Oh, yan, ganyan. So, yan yun. That's why knowing different drug-drug interaction is quite uh, difficult because you have to remember everything. But don't worry, we don't need to remember those. Right? We don't need to memorize everything. We only take note of the important ones. And what are the important ones? We will go there when we go to pharmacogenetics. Right? So these are just nice to know. And there are, ito, as we say there is drug-drug interaction, we say there is a food-drug interaction, and even some herbs, no? These drugs and some St. John's works, right? This is a supplement, right? Uh, this could induce the activity of a certain cytochrome P450 enzyme. Okay? When you say inducers, these are drugs and substances that will enhance or promote the activity of that particular cytochrome or hasten the activity of that particular enzyme. So when you say the enzyme is induced, then its capacity to metabolize is increased, right? Meaning to say they become faster, they metabolize more drugs, and therefore it would affect the concentration of the drug which they metabolize. Because if the drug is metabolized right away, then the plasma concentration will also be reduced. And that may affect the efficacy of the drug. Now, these are drugs and substances which inhibit the enzyme activity. Say your grapefruit juice. This may inhibit an enzyme that metabolize a drug that lowers the cholesterol. So therefore, there are certain drugs which you cannot take together with grapefruit juice, as this will inhibit the activity of the metabolizing enzyme. So what happens? If it inhibits the metabolizing enzyme, then the plasma concentration of the drug is increased. You say, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Now, it's it's a bad thing because the higher the concentration, if the drug concentration becomes higher than the therapeutic concentration, it is not a good thing. It will cause more adverse effect than uh, therapeutic effect. Then lastly, we have excretion. Right? Excretion is the final elimination from the body's systemic circulation via the kidney to the urine, to the bowel, saliva, into the intestine, and into the feces via sweat, skin, and the milk. So the kidney is the most important organ of excretion. Right? So factors that modify the excretion of drug include the age, the disease state, the rate of excretion, enterohepatic recirculation, and ion traffic. So age. What about the age? Now, this is the excretion at age affecting excretion mainly occur in the pediatric age group. see that in as much as no more new glomeruli are added to the glomeruli once a newborn is once a baby is born, the function, however, is not the same as that of adult, and therefore the excretion of certain substances may be limited. Now, there are drugs that cannot be given to these very young patients because of their ability to excrete these drugs, because of decreased ability of excretion that could lead to toxicity. How about disease states? Of course, when patient has renal failure, renal insufficiency, then the ability to excrete drug is limited, and that could lead to toxicity. How about rate of excretion? Now, if the rate of excretion is diminished, and what would be the factors that will delay the rate of excretion? Well, it depends on the blood flow. Again, when there is obstruction, when there is decreased blood flow to the kidney caused by dehydration, then the rate of excretion would be diminished. And that could lead to toxicity as the concentration of the drug remains elevated. Then we have the enterohepatic recirculation. What is enterohepatic recirculation and what is ion trapping? Now, enterohepatic recirculation is also called as biliary recycling. It is the phenomenon in which drugs emptied via the bile into the small intestine is reabsorbed from the intestinal lumen back to the systemic circulation. Okay? So, meaning to say, the waste product from the liver going to the intestine is recycled. Okay? It is reutilized. It goes back to the systemic circulation. It is not excreted right away. So that is what you call enterohepatic recirculation, okay? Or biliary recycling. These are drugs and chemicals that undergo enterohepatic recirculation. Okay? Now, these become very useful. These drugs, right, that undergo enterohepatic recirculation may become toxic, or more toxic, especially when they are given at a very high doses, because these drugs are not easily excreted. Remember, they are metabolized and then they're supposed to be excreted in the small intestine, but then they undergo recycling. So they are not excreted thoroughly in the body. And therefore, uh, these drugs may have a person who's taking this drug continuously may develop risk of toxicity. Oh. Now, what is ion trapping? Now, ion trapping is the phenomenon wherein um, is an ionized drug is trapped in a particular compartment, and then it is not reabsorbed, or it is its excretion is enhanced. So iron trapping is especially seen in the kidneys. So in an alkaline urine, right, if the urine has an alkaline pH, weakly acidic drugs are ionized. They are trapped in the kidney tubules, and they are therefore they are not reabsorbed. Remember, we said a while ago that if drugs are ionized, they are not easily absorbed, and therefore they stay in that particular compartment. They are trapped, and when they are trapped in the kidney tubules, they are easily excreted in the urine. In an acidic urine pH, weakly basic drugs will become ionized. Okay? So when they are ionized, they are polar, they are water soluble, they are trapped, and they are excreted. So that is the principle of ion trapping. The pH of that compartment will cause ionization of a particular drug depending on the pH in that compartment. Okay? Depending on the pH of the compartment and the acidity um, uh, or the alkalinity of the drug. Now, we will proceed with clinical kinetic later in the afternoon. So, do you have questions? Yung pala, wala na kayo, no? Yung pala, wala naman pala akong pinag-uusap. Diyan pa. Diyan pa ba kayo? So, 10:04 na, no? So, mag-end muna tayo dito, but I'll see you at 2 o'clock, no? We'll continue with clinical kinetics in the afternoon. So please write all the things that you failed to understand, and then we'll try to explain that again later. Okay? Now, please try to read the notes in the manual. I will also upload my lecture later on in Moodle. Okay? So I will just give you a instead of a quiz, it will be a take-home quiz, no? Because it's not your fault that we were delayed, but it's the internet's fault. Okay, so I'll see you later at 2 o'clock. All right, so I'll just post the um, the link later, okay, for 2 o'clock uh, continuation of the lecture. Okay, see you. Bye. See you later.
Thank you.